Welcome back to the channel, lads and ladies, and welcome back once again to an airplane that should be familiar to you fans of the channel. But I ended up having so much fun in this thing that I just couldn't help myself. I don't know what the deal was, but I guess I'm starting to learn how the German 20 mils fire, and I've adjusted my strategies a little bit. I'm really warming up to this plane, and man, let me tell you, this bird is definitely one of the most competitive and rewarding vehicles in the game, and that really shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that sees the repair cost on this thing. And keep in mind that repair costs are half for premium vehicles, so the regular tech tree variant has an absolutely insane repair cost, but sitting at, what is it, around 20-some thousand silver lions. That's not an insignificant amount, even in Air RB, and yet here we are, in position. In this match, we've climbed to altitude, and we've just noticed our first enemy. I actually noticed a decent amount of B-17s in these few matches that I was playing, and those have been somewhat rare in other times, and I think I just demonstrated why. The German 20 mils just absolutely shred those things. So you'll notice that we did a fairly good job of positioning ourselves. On a B-17, they do have guns everywhere, but there's a few angles you can come in that sort of reduce the amount of guns pointing at you. And especially, there are side gunners on the B-17, but it's just one gun at a time, which is always helpful. And if you come in from the side, you can avoid the ball turret, which is actually quite deadly, as well as the top turret, which again, 2 50 cals pointing in your direction, even 4 at longer ranges, not so nice. And you definitely want to avoid the tail gunner. For those of you that are not familiar with the strategy for killing bombers, as we dive down on what appears to be either an attacker or a bomber flying at low altitude, you definitely want to avoid the tail gunner on any aircraft, because those bullets will be flying directly at you. All the enemy gunner has to do is point his gun pretty much directly at your airplane, and he'll start getting hits. So never ever fly directly behind an enemy that has defensive gunners. And in the case of different aircraft, there's different angles you want to use, and I feel we demonstrated a good approach on that B-17. A little bit of risky business here, letting the AD-4 get his guns on us. He did have a brief window to fire, and he took that opportunity, but between his what could have been armor piercing, or maybe ground target rounds going right through us, or maybe a little bit of sparking going on there, he wasn't able to take us down. And again, we could have avoided that brief head-on, but I went for it, and it turned out well for me. Now, I need to regain some altitude. I'm right down on the deck. I know there's another enemy plane in this area, so I'm looking around trying to find him. Already with 2 kills, I've paid for my flyout, and I'm in the midst of researching the 8.0 jet for the Italians. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's the late model one that has slightly better stats. And here we see, once again, another heavy bomber coming in at low altitude this time, and we come in from a head-on. Not the best approach, especially since he ducked down, which would give his top gunner a chance to shoot at us. But on the B-17, I believe the top gunner by default is facing toward the rear, which is actually appropriate. So it takes him a few seconds to whirl that turret around, and by then, the pass is already done. The key with taking you down a B-17 in that situation is to cause crippling damage with one pass. the front gunner on a B-17 is pretty toothless. So if you do have the chance to go head on with a B-17, that is one of the best ways to take them down. Same goes for a B-29, although most B-29 players are not going to give you that opportunity. So already we've harvested a quick 3 kills on enemy aircraft that really weren't in a position to have an advantage over us, but that also came down to the attack angles that we chose. So if you can take anything away from this part of the video, it is know your angles. For a lot of bombers, you want to attack from below and off to the side, or directly off to the side of an enemy if you can. Definitely not from directly behind. If you have the chance, sometimes it's helpful to attack from above, although many bombers often have a midsection ball turret or something that can cover the entire airspace above them. And on almost everything, with the distinct exception of the B-25, it is generally the best strategy to attack a bomber from directly in front if you have that opportunity. And most bomber pilots, being aware of that, are going to nose down and try to get underneath you so that their top gunner, and then in the past their rear gunner, will have a chance to take you down. And one thing that I'm extremely grateful for the cannon buff is the incredible stopping power, just unmatched power of German 20 mils. The 20 mils now, with the Menengeschoss rounds, hit just about as hard as the 30 mils did before the cannon buff, and with less disappearing rounds. And now is a great time to take the opportunity to say that Gaijin has really done a lot. Ooh, that kill though. How many does that bring us up to? 4? But man, when you watch a Menengeschoss just explode an enemy's fuel tank and thus their entire airplane, that is a very, very satisfying feeling. What was I saying? Kind of lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, Gaijin has done a lot in the past year to improve the core mechanics of AirRB, and I really appreciate it. And when you're flying in an aircraft like this one, you really feel you can get a lot out of the effort that they've put in. Unfortunately, and I feel like this is also highlighted by today's gameplay, a lot of vehicle types get no benefit out of that, even some harm. Imagine B-17 players now. I feel sorry for them. A B-17 is just nowhere near as durable as I feel like it should be. Is that 5 kills now? Excellent, excellent. That was a nice, easy ace. We really ended up being in the right position at the right time in this match. So that was a lot of fun. I do not get ace gameplay very often, so I really appreciate that. But moving on to what I was talking about before, there are a lot of vehicles in the game that just don't really fit in with the meta of these team deathmatch game modes that we see in air realistic, in ground realistic, even to a lesser extent I feel in tank arcade and air arcade. Think about helicopters. They're either totally overpowered or extremely difficult to do well in, and it doesn't really come down to balancing or fine-tuning the stats and things like armor protection and durability of the helicopter. It's always going to be the case that they're just not as agile as aircraft at their battle ratings, and the tanks that they're shooting at are a whole lot tougher than they're ever going to be. So it's a tough position to be in. And then when you get into the helicopters, they can have ATGMs. They just have one tactic that really works, and that's to be completely in another time zone as the enemies that they're destroying with their guided missiles. and it just ends up being not very fun. However, the versus game mode for helicopters is fun, but it's just really, really bare bones. There's not much for you to do. There's a couple maps where you can do things like capture points, and I think that's really cool. And yet, the rewards for killing ground targets and capturing points pale in comparison to the rewards for going PvP and just killing other helicopters. And helicopter on helicopter combat is fun for a little while, but eventually you just realize it's pretty one-sided. It's not all that dynamic. You don't get into things like dogfights. It's just more along the lines of who can get their guns on target or who can get that miracle hit with a guided missile. So what then? And I haven't even really mentioned about how bombers are completely unbalanced. They're either made out of tissue paper, which is the case right now, or they're nigh indestructible and thus frustrating for enemy fighters to take down. Although I really enjoyed hunting bombers back when bomber spam was a thing. I loved taking down BV-238s back when they were nigh indestructible, because you had to think, and you could do it if you would just deal a lot of damage to one wing or set fire to the fuel tanks. There was always a way to take down those behemoths, and yet at the same time, I think here's the real issue, is that you couldn't ignore them. I would love to see a game mode where bombers are free to do what bombers do best, which is to drop ordnance on target, and they don't have to worry so much about interception. They don't have to just be a free kill like you saw with those B-17s. I mean, look at the score I got out of this match, because for the 2 bombers and 1 attacker I was able to take down, which really didn't stand a chance at all. I mean, they had seconds to try and hit me with their guns, and it was just a very one-sided fight. So what would be a way to balance that out? And in the past, that's the reason that you've seen Gaijin really pendulum shifting between making bombers extremely durable, which I think is actually fairly reasonable. People complain about, I hit that bomber with 250 cal rounds, or I hit that bomber with dozens of 20 mil and it didn't go down. Well, guess what? It's realistic. Especially heavy bombers like B-17s. And here, I was climbing and then I saw this cloud of bombers and I was just like, well, I've gotta, right? How can I not just tear into these guys? So there's a double kill. And then, there's a third one. So let's just roll up. B-25, so again, you don't want to head on this guy, but he is just trying to zoom past me, and again, a few hits with the 20 mils just absolutely devastates his left wing and takes him down. And frankly, I'd like to see bombers become a lot more durable as they were back in the past. Not just because I would like to fly a bomber and be able to survive a few hits, and that good crit on the C-Fire is going to be able to take him down, but at the same time, that's the end of the match for me there. So just a minute of action and a quick 4 kills. We climbed for a while, and well, we're going to leave the battle up to someone else. But that was a pretty good quick harvesting of kills for us. So I'd like to see bombers a lot tougher. I actually enjoyed playing bombers a lot more when that was the case, and I enjoyed facing bombers more when that was the case. Take, for example, that head-on with the B-17s there. I still would have gotten those kills if a B-17 had a lot tougher damage model, because I just shredded the cockpit and killed the pilots. The B-25, if he was a lot tougher, I probably would have been able to saw off his wing there if he was 2 or 3 times as durable as he is right now, just because of the power of those 20 mils, which I feel is appropriate. But should 1 or 2 rounds into the heavily armored tail of a B-25 blow off all the control surfaces? Should 3 or 4 20 mils snap the tail off of a B-25 entirely? Should a Grizzly have his extremely large wing blown off by 1 or 2 high explosive rounds of 20 mil or the like? I think that realistically we can agree that's not the case. This is a concession to really fighter pilots, I suppose, to make it easier to play wrong against bombers and still be able to take them down. And yet, with the attack vectors that I was using, aircraft destroyed. What a beautiful night battle this is. You can see that I've changed the graphics. By the way, if you get into a night battle in an airplane, I honestly think that air night battles are stupid. Mainly because of this reason. You can't see the ground. Not only that, you can't see the runway. And this battle's not going to end so well for us, but at least we got 1 kill. Check out this dogfight that's coming. We have an F4U on our tail, which at this altitude is really a lot for us to try and handle. I need to get this guy down to lower altitude, but I'm also interested in trying to bleed him of energy, and it's now that I realize that the F4U has insane energy retention. So he's actually going to out energy fight me at this altitude if he plays his cards right, and this guy is no fool. So while you watch this pirouetting of deadly death and deadliness, and see when I pop the flaps and all that fun stuff, just trying to get some advantage over this guy, trying to stall him out so that my allies can get a shot on him, and they're just not quite able to take him down. Let's go back to the topic I was talking about before, as your eyes feast on this spectacle. And okay, so first point, fairly simple: tougher bombers. I feel that that would bring things closer in line to realism. But the main thing, and I've harped on this before, and so I don't want to go all out, and try and convince you guys, but just this is what would balance tougher bombers. Number 1, make it impossible to win a match just by destroying bases and the airfield. If you destroy the airfield, how about your team can no longer land and repair and refuel and rearm on a destroyed airfield? I feel that's fair. In fact, I would take it even further. For every airfield, I would model a fuel supply, so that if the enemy can destroy your fuel supply, you'll have stacked fuel tanks, barrels. And if they destroy your fuel supply, no more refueling on the airstrip. That would be really cool. And if you destroy the landing strip itself, then make it no longer to repair the aircraft on the landing strip. I feel that's fair. And yet, don't make it to where the enemy team's tickets bleed until they lose the match. I feel that unstoppable ticket bleed is really not the appropriate way to go about making air realistic battles fun. What can you do? For every, we'll call it, runway module destroyed, you'll have the fuel depot, you'll have the runway itself, and then you could even have things like, say crew quarters, right? The tents. Or even there could be vehicles parked on the runway that you could destroy, but give specific things to destroy, not just a star that is the runway and everything just bleeds down a hit points bar until you get "you has win" game, And here we go into a match where I made a new friend, and so that was pretty cool. There's a couple of PlayStation players, and I couldn't tell you how they were doing, but I was having a great time. I was really focused on the action here, And I also have names turned off, so I can't tell who's who when I'm in a battle. It just makes the UI a lot cleaner for me, and that's something that I need. As we pick up the kill there after getting a few critical hits on that enemy fighter. So I'd like to see airfields have actual things to destroy that make a difference in the match, and no ticket bleed. Instead, just make every part of the runway and parts of the enemy bases worth a specific amount of tickets, and not enough to be able to let bombers completely win a match just by bombing things, but enough to make a difference and to give a chance, or at least some meaningful advantage, like taking away the runway, again without ending the match. That can be a huge advantage. And it would fix things like bomber spam, where you get really powerful bombers that just bomb everything and win the match in a few minutes and give the fighters nothing left to do. Let the fighters bomb things and let it give an advantage or a disadvantage to the fighters in the sky. Make the bombers tougher so that they're not just food for fighters, and yet a fighter can have an appropriate attack vector and good strategy and still be able to take them down, as we've seen back when bombers were tougher, for those of you that have been in the game that long. And that way, if you're flying in some interceptor or fighter and you're newer and you're not confident, or you don't know how to take down a bomber, you can avoid them and you can take down something else, just knowing that those bombs are going to cause a serious tactical inconvenience to you. It's really a simple idea. Another thing I'd like to see for airfields, now that I'm on the topic, just after we got out of that night battle, is it's 2018. Gaijin, why are there no lights on the runways? I find that absolutely ridiculous. So give us lights, give us flares, give us bonfires, give us something to light up the runway during night battles. It's just ridiculous. No one would expect, ordinary fighter aircraft, if they were actually flying at night, which seems like a dumb idea to me, but okay. No one would expect them to land on a dark airstrip. Even dedicated night fighters with the ability to do things like an instrument landing suffer serious casualties and losses when they try to do things like that, because it's stupid. So Gaijin, you have an awesome game here. Put some lights on the runways. You can even have them on during the daytime, because nobody will care. But throw a few flares down along the runways and just have flares burning. That would be my fix. It's a simple light source, it's easy to model, and all it needs to be is some points of light. It doesn't need to be, really dynamic or take up a bunch of resources or time. Do we already have flares in the game? I think that'd be a really cool thing. It just, in general, it'd be awesome to be able to carry and drop flares. Even if it's not just for night battles, maybe it could do something like reveal the location of ground targets for friendly aircraft in ARB. Wouldn't that be cool? If you could drop some flares and thus mark the location of certain ground targets on the map for, say, other attackers. Maybe you're going back to base and you're out of ammunition, and on your way back you just drop some flares where the enemy bunkers are or whatever, and it lights them up. And during night battles, that will look so cool. And that's an easy thing to put into the game, but again, I feel that that's not really necessary, but lighting the runways at night, definitely necessary. Anyway, I got my first 6-kill game in, it's got to be ages. I don't think I've had those since when the BV-238 came out. It was just ludicrously overpowered. Anyway, very satisfying, and I had a blast. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a bit of a long one, and I took the chance to just kind of daydream with you guys. And, well, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.